Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because, well, you're curious, right? You want to get a handle on the big ideas shaping our world, maybe without drowning in all the details.
Exactly. There's so much out there, it's good to just focus in sometimes.
Well, today we're really diving into something fascinating. It's an article called What Happens When Money Becomes Meaningless.
Hmm.
Just that title alone, it kind of stops you in your tracks, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It forces you to think about something so fundamental, something we kind of take for granted in our daily lives.
Right. And this piece, it's not your standard tech prediction. It does something pretty interesting, mixing forecasts about, artificial general intelligence, AGI, with some pretty deep theological ideas.
Which is quite an unusual blend. You don't often see those two worlds brought together so directly.
Totally. And the core argument is really bold. It's basically saying that potentially within this decade, the actual meaning and importance of money could, well, evaporate because of how fast AGI is expected to grow.
Yeah, it's suggesting that money itself might stick around in some form, but its grip on our lives, our decisions, our whole society, that could dramatically loosen. It's less about currency mechanics, more about like the concept of value itself.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. The article talks about this tsunami of AGI. Sounds dramatic.
It does, but they use that classic chessboard analogy to explain it. You know, the one grain of rice on the first square, then two, then four.
Ah, right, the doubling thing. Starts slow, seems manageable.
Exactly. But by the time you're halfway across the board, the numbers are just staggering, astronomical. And that's the argument for AGI. We're maybe hitting that rapid acceleration part of the curve now or very soon.
We tend to think linearly, day by day, but this is exponential.
Precisely. And the changes could come much, much faster than our intuition tells us.
And they give a concrete example to make it less abstract. AI in medical imaging.
Diagnosing scans.
Yeah. They project AI hitting like 99.8% accuracy by 2026.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's potentially way beyond what most human experts can consistently achieve, right?
It is. And if that happens, you immediately see the implications. It's not just about improving things slightly. It's about potentially surpassing human capabilities in complex cognitive tasks. Think about radiologists, diagnosticians.
Entire professions could be fundamentally changed or even displaced, and probably at a lower cost.
That's often the driver, yes. It illustrates how AGI isn't just about automating simple stuff anymore.
And then the article just scales that idea way up. It paints this picture of future factories, maybe churning out 1 billion robots a year, robots that can even build more robots.
The scale is almost hard to comprehend. It points towards a level of automation and productivity that's just unprecedented in human history.
Which leads to the next big idea, this shift from scarcity, which is basically the foundation of our entire economic system.
To potential abundance. If AGI and robots can produce goods and services so efficiently and cheaply, maybe almost freely.
Then the whole game changes. Our current economics is built on things being limited. Time is limited, resources are limited, labor is limited.
But if production costs plummet towards zero for many things, the article uses this phrase, like a Garden of Eden scenario, where necessities, maybe even many luxuries, are just available.
It's a mind-bending thought experiment. What happens then?
Well, that's the core question, isn't it? If the basic struggle for survival for resources diminishes significantly, what actually drives us? What organizes society?
And this is where their idea of a universal basic income comes in, but like on steroids. They're not talking about a small safety net.
No, they suggest a UBI potentially 10 times the average income we see today.
Which sounds unbelievable. They draw this parallel to manna in the desert, like sustenance just provided.
It implies a complete decoupling of income from traditional work because the wealth generation is happening through AI and automation. So you need a new way to distribute that wealth, that abundance.
And here's where it gets really interesting, where they weave in those theological quotes, stuff like 1 Timothy, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
And the one from Matthew, what good is it to gain the whole world, yet forfeit your soul?
It's such an unexpected lens to view this potential future through. It's asking us to think about our current relationship with money, not just economically, but maybe spiritually or morally.
Right. It suggests that maybe our intense focus on accumulating wealth isn't just being challenged practically by AGI, but perhaps it's also, from this theological view, not the ultimate goal for human flourishing anyway.
And in this future of abundance, the article argues something counterintuitive. The actual prestige of being wealthy might fade.
If everyone has their needs met, and has access to a high standard of living.
Then what's the point of having, 10 super yachts instead of one? Does it still carry the same social weight? They even suggest simplicity might become the new luxury, the new status symbol.
It's a fascinating inversion. Maybe value shifts from having things to being something or doing something meaningful.
Which perfectly leads to what the article calls the new currency. Not dollars or Bitcoin, but things like purpose, contribution.
Yeah, the quality of your relationships, your spiritual or moral integrity, things you can't just buy.
That's a fundamental shift in what society values, moving away from external markers like wealth.
Towards more internal qualities, character, connection, making a difference. How we measure success could completely change.
Now, they are careful, though. The article doesn't say money just vanishes overnight. It acknowledges money still has basic functions.
Right, like a medium of exchange, a store of value, a unit of account. You still need ways to, trade things or measure value somehow.
So maybe things like cryptocurrencies, token economies, digital currencies, they could still exist for those practical reasons.
Definitely. The key point isn't that currency disappears entirely. It's that the psychological and social power of money, its role as the main driver, the ultimate goal, that's what might really diminish.
But there's a reality check too, right? Even with amazing AGI, we still live on a physical planet.
Exactly. Raw materials, land, energy, those aren't infinite. Even if AGI makes production super efficient, you still need the basic inputs.
So you'll likely still need some system to allocate those finite resources. And money, or something like it, could still be part of that system.
It's not pure fantasy land. It's about a shift in emphasis away from money as the be-all and end-all. Because basic needs are met, but resource management still matters.
Okay, so the timeline. When could this possibly happen? The article mentions some pretty, aggressive timelines for AGI.
Yeah, it references people like Elon Musk, Ray Kurzweil. Some predictions put human-level AI potentially happening this decade, between, say, 2026 and 2029.
Which feels incredibly soon, almost unnervingly soon.
It does, and it's crucial to remember these are projections, right? There's a lot of debate about the actual timeline for true AGI. The article itself actually flags some major hurdles.
Okay, like what could slow this down or stop it?
Well, first, just coordinating this globally. Imagine trying to get all countries on board with such a massive economic and social shift. That's a huge challenge.
Yeah, understatement.
Then there are the physical limits we just mentioned. The sheer amount of energy needed to power all this advanced AI and robotics. The rare earth minerals required. Building the infrastructure. These are enormous practical problems.
And the UBI itself, that massive figure you mentioned earlier.
Right. They estimate something like $3.4 trillion per year, just for a global UBI of $1,000 a month. Finding and distributing that kind of money consistently presents, a pretty formidable economic challenge.
Okay, those are definitely significant roadblocks. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, we somehow navigate them. The article then gets to what feels like the most profound question.
Who are we when we no longer need to work to survive?
Exactly. If your identity isn't tied to your job, your paycheck, what defines you? What gives your life meaning?
It really forces a deep self-reflection. What provides purpose when the daily grind for survival is removed? How do we find value for ourselves and in the eyes of society?
And the article hints at this potential shift back towards maybe more communal values, echoing perhaps early ideals of shared resources, community focus, rather than pure individualism.
It's a fascinating thought that overcoming material scarcity might actually push us towards prioritizing connection, collective well-being, spiritual growth over just individual gain.
And it wraps up with this powerful idea that the meaning of money just evaporates, and instead, things like love, joy, peace, what the article calls spiritual fruit, become the real measure of a worthwhile life. Referencing that biblical idea of the last being first, a sort of great revaluation.
A complete reversal of what often drives society today.
So, okay, the big picture here. This article sketches out a potentially revolutionary future, all kicked off by the exponential rise of AGI. It's a future where money's traditional power could seriously decline.
Making way for new values, new motivations, a whole new definition of a successful life.
And it does it by weaving together these cutting-edge tech predictions with really ancient wisdom or theological ideas, which is just a fascinating mix.
It definitely challenges us to think way beyond just the gadgets and algorithms, and to consider the deep human questions that technology surfaces. What kind of future do we actually want to build with these powerful tools?
So here's the thought I want to leave you with, something to chew on from this deep dive. If you lived in a world where your basic needs were met, where you didn't have to work just to pay the bills, what would truly motivate you? What would give your life purpose and fulfillment when money isn't the main driver? It's a huge question, and exploring that article definitely brings it front and center. Thanks for joining us.